Before outrage ensues, the title is clickbait, kinda, in a way. Please hear me out. Some of you might already know this, but almost a year ago, two very popular living and breathing bungholes made videos unjustly targeting an individual that identified as Autismgender. Yes, I'm making the video based on Calvin Gara's content again. Leave me alone. He played the internet long enough. It's my turn to rule the community. So, before I continue, trigger warning: transphobia, discrimination against neurodivergent people within the medical field, suicide, and cops. Though I don't know whether this person they harassed still identifies as Autismgender, and I'm not sure about their relation to this label, but that isn't what this video is about. Now, I'm not expecting anyone who is completely anti-Muggen to leave this video as a new person with a new worldview. This video is more intended for people who are a bit confused, but open to listen, learn, and accept. I would have never thought that I would ever make a video like this 2 years ago. I went from, I personally don't see how you can be trans without dysphoria, to, actually, why can't autism be a gender? And that's called progress. I mean, it's an odd label, I think anyone can admit that. And anything outside the norm often causes confusion that in return leads to anger, unfortunately. But personally, I think it's a dope-ass label, and I want to explain to those curious as to why people would associate their gender with autism. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stigma regarding autistic people identifying as trans, and personally that has interfered with my journey towards gender discovery. Unfortunately, our society has a problem with infantilizing autistic individuals and often undermines our experiences. We're often made to feel as we're completely oblivious and couldn't possibly understand our own gender identity, which is absolutely ridiculous with a hint of ableism. A lot of trans people in general have probably at one point had someone question their gender identity, whether they think they're too young to understand, too old to have lived your entire life without transitioning earlier, or too aligned with your birth sex. There's always going to be excuses, because at the end of the day that's easier to grasp, rather than accepting that this individual actually is trans. So the prejudice against autistic people is only another layer of doubt used to invalidate their experiences. This translates into real-life discrimination when we're not taken seriously. This was the case for the 24-year-old autistic trans man, Kaden Clark. His severe gender dysphoria led him to attempt suicide. In February of 2016, neighbors called the cops on him for suspecting that he was attempting suicide. He was shot and killed in his own home by the cops. It's a tragic story that deserves recognition in and of itself, but how could things go so wrong? Why didn't Kaden get any help to alleviate his gender dysphoria? Well, like a lot of other trans people with a desire to transition physically, he absolutely did. But unfortunately, his identity as an autistic trans man was never respected by the multiple mental health professionals involved. In his last YouTube video, he described how a therapist declared that he's ineligible for hormone treatment. She refused to approve him for hormones, something that in many cases can be life-saving, until he was quote-unquote cured of the disease. Her own words allegedly, the disease being autism. It's not hard to see that this therapist had done no prior research on autism before their meeting, despite it being included in Kaden's file. Now, if you know anything about autism, then you probably know it's not a disease. It's nothing wrong with being autistic. It's a neurological disorder and it's not curable. There's no reason for there to be a cure. You don't fix something that isn't broken. It doesn't make you bad, and it doesn't make you act out for no reason. There are reasons, but what caused it might not occur to someone neurotypical. Some of the symptoms can cause problems for an autistic individual, and that's why we find solutions that work best for them. There's nothing that is applicable to everyone, And I think that's something that goes for neurotypical people too. I think we should tend to individual needs simply. This therapist should have known better than to assume that his struggles with gender dysphoria was solely due to him being autistic. Doing research for this video, I watched a web seminar by the psychologist, lecturer and author Wen Lawson, an autistic trans man who transitioned at the age of 60. Something that I hadn't thought of before that he brought up is the worry that there might be a possible confusion between gender dysphoria and sensor sensitivity. Does the individual want to change their body because they feel a disconnect, or merely because they dislike the sensation of having pressure on their chest or something between their legs? It's definitely something to take into consideration, but like Lawson explained in his web seminar, it's not something we should get hung up on, because with a thorough examination, it's possible to work it out and provide the individual with the best treatment. Lawson himself thinks it's necessary to go into this with an open mind and never prematurely conclude that it's simply a symptom of autism. This led him to going 60 years before he actually pursued top surgery because of the assumption that his discomfort with his chest was merely because of sensory issues. He thinks the best way to support an autistic and possibly transgender kid is to simply listen, let them do what they're more comfortable with, without prescribing labels, and simply trust that the child truly knows who they are, because at the end of the day, we will always know ourselves better than anyone else. And this goes for neurotypical children too. I'm inclined to mention that there's studies to show that autistic people are more likely than neurotypical people to suffer from gender dysphoria. Now, I'm not comfortable speculating as to why that is, and it would be very irresponsible of me. The only quote-unquote cure we have to treat gender dysphoria is providing gender-affirming treatment right now, so I think it's disgusting and inhumane that rather than helping autistic people who express a desire to transition, we always stop to question why gender dysphoria is overrepresented in autistic people. Rather than accepting that this is the case and providing treatment just like they would with any other patient, their initial reaction is to doubt them and neglect them. As much as I'm repulsed by it, I can't say that it's really a surprise. Cis people have a hard time accepting trans people for who they are and need an explanation for why they are the way they are, when there doesn't really need to be one, we just are. And history has proven that we don't deserve to understand why anyone is trans, autistic, or anything not considered the norm. 'Cause the next question will always be, how do we stop it? How do we stop these people from existing? In conclusion, do I want gender dysphoria to exist? Fuck no, I hate it. Do I want trans people to exist? Hell yeah, trans people are awesome, fuck you. I'm of the firm belief that gender dysphoria isn't inherent to being trans. You're trans when you identify as anything other than what you were assigned at birth, and there's many different reasons to be trans. That being said, let's dive into my favorite theories as to why autistic people are more likely to be trans. First of all, we're all intellectuals here who know that gender is culturally defined. Though a lot are still stuck on the traditional view on gender, that is the binary, woman and man, it's more nuanced than that, and honestly, sometimes it can be hard to navigate, and it's much easier, safer, and comfortable sticking to society's expectations, which is identifying as what you were assigned at birth. A typical trait in autistic individuals is the focus they put on certain details, while neurotypicals tend to see the whole picture. Not saying that autistic people are unable to do that, but they're more likely to see the intricacies of gender and put more weight on it, which is how we're more likely to discover that we're, for example, non-binary. We're just simply too big-brained to be cis. One of my favorite theories has to do with how we're influenced by society, and I'm not talking about any turfy theory that we're dumb fucks who are groomed by the so-called trans cult to go through gender-affirming treatment. That's stupid as hell, and I wish there was a trans cult. Join our cult. But We all know that autistic people tend to be less affected by social norms. What you're expected to say or do during social interaction doesn't always come naturally to us. With a lot of practice, it's possible though. And that's how I always get the annoying comments that I don't seem autistic. Thank you. Very kind of you to assume that I'm neurotypical, because, I wouldn't want you to think that I'm neurodivergent, because that means I'm abnormal, and that is not okay. Just kidding. The fact that a lot of expectations that we're constantly bombarded with from childhood rolls off us like water from a duck's back results in gender nonconformity, which doesn't necessarily make you trans, but I would argue it's one step away from changing your pronouns and identifying as another gender. Because gender is a social construct, and we're literally immune to it. We're fucking immune to cis-normativity. This kind of goes hand in hand with my previous point, but the fact that we're less likely to adhere to social expectations, whether it's because we're unaware or because we simply don't care. In my case, it's usually the latter. Listen, sometimes I just don't care that people are gonna be put off by me doing something. Sometimes I just need to do it. It's self-care. Anyways, this makes it easier to either come to terms with or come out as being trans than it would when you're weighed down by all the possible reactions you might be faced with. We're simply more honest with ourselves and others. There's a lot of theories, and doing research on this has been very therapeutic because, in all honesty, my autism diagnosis interfered with me coming to terms with my gender identity. Before I even knew that more autistic people were trans, I let the internalized negative stereotypes about autism prevent me from exploring further, like a lot of other aspects of my life. I could make a whole other video talking about the stigma and how it harms us, but that's for the future. We're often made to feel like children that couldn't possibly have a deep understanding of our gender or sexuality. A lot of us need help within different areas of our life, and that's okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but we still deserve the same respect that anyone else, and if we say we're not comfortable with our gender, then people should listen. Be there and help us figure out the path we want to go, whether that's medical treatment or using a new name. It's definitely interesting that there's more documented autistic experiencing gender dysphoria and or identifying as another gender than what they were born at birth. And while there's a lot of theories, I want you all to take what I've said with a grain of salt, because I don't believe any of this is confirmed. We don't know why this is the case. We have only hypothesized. And at the end of the day, why does that even matter? Why does it matter that there's more autistic people that are trans than neurotypicals? I've never heard this kind of research being used for any good, because it's an overlap between two marginalized groups that a lot of people have wanted to eradicate at the end of the day. Rather than looking at this phenomenon and thinking, how do we stop it? We should think, how do we help them? What we really need is acceptance and resources. Unfortunately, I don't think that will be the case, at least not in a very long time. Meanwhile, we can spread love and positivity within our own community. There's nothing wrong with being trans, and while we put a lot of focus on the negative aspects, I would love to see more people highlighting the positives. Although I would have really liked to have a masculine body, I'm kinda happy that I wasn't born a cis man, because I wouldn't be me if I was. Although I don't like that I've always been seen as a girl, I'm happy that I was socialized as one, because I don't like to think about who I would have been if I wasn't. I don't know, man, I just like to focus on the good things. That being said, it's completely different to be an autistic trans person and to identify as Autismgender. Or is it? Honestly, I don't know what their intention was with this label, but I could definitely see how it's a way to describe that their autism plays into how they view their gender. And according to what I've read online, that's absolutely the case. I'll admit, I'm not well versed when it comes to Muggen gender. Unfortunately, I've only heard about it in the context of it being ridiculed. but I'm absolutely willing to learn about it and educate myself. Oftentimes, it's other, often binary trans people mocking it under the guise of wanting to protect the trans community, because if cis people heard of these wacky labels, they would just hate all of us. First of all, cis people, mind your own damn business. Secondly, to me, it seems as if Mogai is such a small portion that cis people wouldn't have known about this before you made a video freaking out about it. I don't know if they're playing it up for the sake of views, but I highly doubt that these Mogai people will have someone ask them if they're a man or a woman, and they would respond with, "Actually, I'm autism." And if someone did introduce themselves as Autismgender to me, then congratulations to them. I'm their new best friend because that's cool as hell. Seriously, I unironically fucking love the idea of someone just identifying as Autismgender. It's a middle finger up to all the discrimination we have to go through, and if that upsets you, then good. I don't need a gentrified trans person in my life. And for it harming the community, I've never been presented with any argument that isn't just metaphorical that proves that it's actually harming the community. But yeah, that being said, has anyone taken the vaccine yet? I've been looking forward to an autism expansion pack, and I really hope it comes with additions to gender. I've tried downloading mods that will make me a few inches taller from Tumblr, but they're too glitchy. I don't know, I'm just really hoping that they won't make manspreading the default position. So that's just my thoughts. I just think we should be more accepting of people. And might I add that I'm just overwhelmed with joy by all the positive comments I've been getting lately. I know it sounds ridiculous seeing as I'm so small, but just one positive comment can make my entire day. I'm so excited for the future and I hope we can interact more. If you'd like to stick around, then you're more than welcome to subscribe. Maybe like this video and comment your thoughts. Okay, so take care, stay awesome, I love you, be kind, bye.